After 200 years of war, the Great Crusade faced its largest conflict, the Ulanor campaign. The Emperor unleashed forces of his 14 legions upon the heart of the Orc Empire, which threatened the Segmentum Solar. On Ulanor, the Imperium crushed the greatest Orc Empire that ever existed, which some call the last real threat to humanity's dominion over the galaxy. Horus personally defeated the Orc warlord Urak-Ur and saved the Emperor's life. Afterwards, the forces of the Imperial Army and Space Marine legions burned to the ground all infested worlds of the Orc Empire. To reward Horus for his achievements, the Emperor bestowed upon him the greatest honor. On the surface of Ulanor, Space Marines, the Imperial Army, the Legios of Titans, and the Mechanicum armies marched triumphantly before the Emperor, Horus, and his 8 Primarch brothers. The Ulanor Triumph concluded with the granting of the title of War Master to Horus. He was appointed the Supreme War Master of all the armed forces and the legions of the Imperium. After that, the Emperor announced his retirement from the Great Crusade. The other Primarchs were subsequently instructed to follow Horus, obey his commands, and fulfill their tasks. Not all Primarchs rejoiced at their brother's new position. It is said that some confusion arose among them because the Emperor decided not to fight alongside them anymore. However, the Emperor remained steadfast and intended to finish his secret project upon his return to Terra. Present at the Ulanor Triumph was the Primarch of the 15th Legion, the Thousand Sons, Magnus the Red, the only one of the Emperor's sons who suspected the reasons for his father's return and his grand project. As a child, Magnus landed on the distant planet of Prospero. He was incredibly lucky to fall on this world, as in most others he would have been an outcast because of his psychic abilities. But Prospero was a world of rejected human psychers, and thus they viewed him as one of their own. By learning the experience and knowledge from local psychers, Magnus became a master of all psychic disciplines and soon surpassed his teachers. Before long, he attained such control over his psychic power that he became, without a doubt, the strongest person on the planet. One day, he made the decision to change the world forever. Instead of summoning warp energies into reality, he himself looked into the immaterium with his cyclopean eye and instantly gained understanding of warp energies at a master level. Magnus learned not only to use warp energy in warfare, but also mastered the art of predictions with great accuracy. He had such strong influence in the warp that it didn't take long for the Emperor to find him. When the Imperium's fleet arrived and their rulers set foot on the planet, they communed as if they had known each other for many years. At the very beginning of the Great Crusade, the Space Marine warriors of the 15th fought for the rapid and active expansion of the Imperium and were not distinguished from the other Adeptus Astartes legions. However, after 5 years of the Crusade, warriors of this legion began to spontaneously develop psychic abilities, after which terrible degenerative mutations ensued. This mutation process was called the Flesh Change, and the soldiers of the Thousand Sons feared it greatly. About this time, Magnus was found. Magnus intervened to save his legion, employing a mysterious procedure that stabilized the genetic code of the Astartes. Ironically, after the procedure, only about 1,000 soldiers of the 15th Legion survived. Under Magnus's leadership, the Legion quickly replenished with new fighters, whom he divided into 9 brotherhoods. Each brotherhood embodied some form of psychic mastery. Some could predict the future, while others wielded battle magic capable of incinerating all enemies with warp fire. This dictated the Legion's tactics, as the warriors preferred to avoid close combat, relying on psychic power instead. In other legions, psychers were a rarity, and were organized into special units called the Librarius. Nonetheless, the 15th Legion was almost entirely composed of them, granting it colossal power on the battlefield. Shortly before the Ulanor Triumph, Magnus brought the world of Agarud to compliance. The peculiarity of the world was the presence of a mysterious mountain that inexplicably suppressed all psychic abilities of the 15th Legion. Upon detailed examination, Magnus realized that this place was a kind of portal to a network of passages at the boundary of normal space and the warp. An intermediate dimension used for travel through space by an unknown race but actively employed by the Eldar, which Magnus could only deduce from the presence of giant statues of Eldar Titans silently guarding the portal. It soon became clear why the Eldar sealed this place. The portal was infested with warp entities, with which Magnus had to fight because the locals who, unbeknownst to him, were making bloody sacrifices there, gradually breaking down the defenses. At the Ulanor Triumph, Magnus reported his findings to the Emperor, but his father told him that he had been long aware of the Webway technology that could potentially free humanity from the dangerous warp transitions. Magnus concluded that it was precisely for the development of an equivalent of such a technology that the Emperor had left the crusade to Horus, so nothing would distract him from such a monumental and important work. However, before departing for Terra, the Emperor had to solve an old problem that had escalated into a crisis. The crisis of the Librarians. Librarians are Psyker Space Marines, possessing psychic gifts and using warp energy in combat. Such warriors often had the ability to read minds, bend others to their will, incinerate foes with devastating energy from the Immaterium, and some possess the gift of foresight. In various legions, they were referred to differently, but the unifying term became Librarium. The origin of the Librarians is shrouded in distrust and intrigue. The training system of the Librarians was created by Magnus the Red, who himself was a powerful Psyker, together with the Primarchs Sanguinius and Jagatai Khan. Despite some Primarchs, especially Korax, Leman Russ, and Mortarion, being categorically against the use of Psykers in Space Marine legions, the first experiments with Librarians were approved by the Emperor. They were considered a good means of controlling the development of the psychic powers of the Space Marines. Soon, gifted Astartes began to be recruited into separate units, excelling in battles due to the use of warp energy. However, more and more frequently during the Imperial conquests, the Army and Space Marines encountered opponents on planets whose populations were enslaved by mysterious powers and dark sorcerers. These people were mostly members of Chaos cults who resisted the Imperium with the aid of Immaterium powers. They used powers very similar to those used by Magnus' Thousand Sons legions and the units of the Librarian. Disputes about the Librarians escalated into a crisis after the incident on Saraputh, where, due to the confusion, the 5th Company of the 6th Legion of Space Wolves, commanded by Jarl Amodi Skarsonsson, entered into battle with a brotherhood from the Thousand Sons. During this clash, the Wolves witnessed the flesh change in a 15th Legion warrior. The conflict escalated into a confrontation between Leman, Russ, and Magnus, in which the Wolves were horrified by the psychic might of the Thousand Sons, and the taint that consumed one of their legionaries, allowing Leman Russ and the others to accuse Magnus in treachery. The schism was so great that it threatened Imperium, and soon, the Emperor himself was forced to call an Imperial conclave at the planet Nikaea, the highest council, in order to resolve the crisis. Each of the Primarchs and senior officials took turns speaking before the Emperor. Some Primarchs spoke in support of the Librarium and Magnus, while others accused him of contradicting Imperial truths with witchcraft. Testifying against Magnus were primarily the Wolves of Russ and the Primarch of the Death Guard, Mortarion. In response to the accusations, Magnus spoke of the great achievements of the Librarians and pointed to the astropaths present in the hall, whose mere presence demonstrated the Imperium's absolute dependence on Psykers. After this, the Lord of Prospero dismissed the accusations of his brothers, stating, "If I am guilty of anything, it is of a common desire for knowledge." As a result of the Nikaean Council, the Emperor issued a decree banning the use of psychic powers, requiring the systematic dissolution of Psyker detachments in all Legion and their reassignment to battle companies as ordinary warriors. Furthermore, the Emperor threatened those who dared to disobey his order with condemnation and total destruction. From the analysis of the Emperor's speech, it becomes apparent that the ruler of humanity understood the problem much more deeply. The following is a quote from the Emperor's speech. "I am not blind to the needs of the Imperium, but nor am I blind to the realities of the hearts of men. I hear men speak of knowledge and power as though they are abstract concepts to be employed as simply as a sword or gun. They are not. Power is a living force, and the danger with power is obsession. A man who obtains a measure of power will find it comes to dominate his life until all he can think of is the acquisition of more. Nearly all men stand adversary, but few could stand the ultimate test of character, that of wielding power without succumbing to its darker temptations. Peering into the darkness to gain knowledge of the warp is fraught with peril, for it is an inconsistent place of shifting reality and capricious lies and untruths. The seeker after truth must have a care he is not deceived, for false knowledge is far more dangerous than ignorance. All men wish to possess knowledge, but few are willing to pay the price. Always men will seek out to take the shortcut, the quick route to power, and it is a man's own mind, not his enemy or foe, that will lure him to evil ways. True knowledge is gained only after the acquisition of wisdom. Without a wisdom, a powerful person does not become more powerful. He becomes reckless. His power will turn on him, and eventually destroy all he has built. I have walked past no men can know, and faced the unnameable creatures of the warp. I understand all too well the secrets and dangers that lurk in its hidden darkness. Such things are for no lesser minds to know, no matter how powerful or knowledgeable they believe themselves to be. The secrets I have shared serve as warnings, not enticements to explore further. Only death and damnation await those who delve too deeply into secrets not meant for mortals. I see now, I allowed my sons to delve too profoundly into matters I should have never permitted them to know even existed. Let it be known that no one shall suffer censor, for this conclave is to serve unity, not discord. But no more shall the threat of sorcery be allowed to taint the warriors of the Astartes. Henceforth, it is my will that no legion will maintain a librarius department. All its warriors and instructors must be returned to the battle companies and never again employ any psychic powers. For those who ignore my warnings or break faith with me, they shall be my enemy, and I will visit such destruction upon them and all their followers that until the end of all things, they shall always regret the day they turned from my light. The Nikaean edict did not apply to astropaths and navigators, without whom communication and interaction in the Imperium would be impossible. Yet, neither this order nor the victory of Rus troubled Magnus anymore. Everything paled in comparison to the vision that had come to him on Nikaea. For a long time, Magnus had been preoccupied with a mysterious veil that prevented him from glimpsing the future, as if something terrible had shrouded the upcoming events in an impenetrable secret. Just before Nikaea, Magnus unexpectedly witnessed the vision of horrifying events. In his vision, he saw a blazing galaxy, Astartes killing Astartes, brother waging war against brother, and Horus. Horus, who will fall victim to the schemes of the dark gods and will lead a civil war of galactic proportions that will doom humanity, thrusting it into the depths of chaos. Naturally, Magnus refused to obey the order, continuing his research to understand how to avert the impending doom. He could do no other, knowing that unknown and underestimated forces of the warp were weaving an intrigue around Horus, cloaked in immense power and authority. It is necessary to note that Magnus knew nothing of Lorgar's plans and the involvement of the Word Bearers. After the events described and the triumph at Ulanor, Horus did everything in his power to continue the campaign, leading the Great Crusade effectively. Time passed, and victory seemed meaningless to him. The self-sacrifice of the Space Marines under his command felt unimportant, and increasingly insignificant to the Silent Emperor, whose gaze no longer caressed his once beloved sons. He felt that some Primarchs envied his newfound rank and often questioned his decisions. Moreover, grievances and rivalries that had long existed between some brothers escalated into open quarrels and fights, which Horus could no longer suppress as easily as the Emperor could, only stoking his wrath. Instead of dealing with dissenters openly, he began to draw closer to those he believed respected him, or at least obeyed without question. Neither the Primarchs nor even Horus himself viewed his authority as absolute and revered, as it was with the Emperor. When news leaked from Terra regarding the transfer of administrative functions to the civilian administratum, and the Imperium began to become orderly and changed with increasing rapidity without his or the Primarch's involvement, Horus and his supporters seemed even more estranged from the man he once revered as father. Slowly, the only concern of the War Master became the completion of the conquest of the galaxy, and the faint comfort of acquiring ever more glory for his legion. And then, the visions of the impending catastrophe that Magnus had seen in his foresight began to materialize through seemingly unrelated events. Anathema, a completely unique type of weapon created by the alien civilization of the Kindbrax at the height of their interstellar civilization. At first glance, resembling ordinary swords, they were crafted using now forbidden and nearly forgotten methods and technologies. It was said that the anathemas contained certain doom for enemies, and wounds inflicted by them never healed. One such blade was stolen from the humanoid race of the Interrex during diplomatic negotiations with Horus regarding their entry into the Imperium, which provoked a conflict and led to the annihilation of this race by the Luna Wolves. A short while later, Horus was informed of a rebellion on Davin, which he had previously conquered. Moreover, the rebellion was sparked by the commander of the Imperial Army, Eugene Temba. This was a significant reputational blow to Horus. How could his brother Primarchs obey him if he was betrayed by his own Imperial generals? The 16th Legion immediately moved to suppress it. The War Master Horus intended to personally participate in the extermination of the Separatists. This sentiment was further fueled by the first chaplain of the Word Bearers, Erebus, who accompanied Horus and his legion during those days. Upon landing in one of the Separatist layers on Davin's moons, the forces were attacked by what once could have been called the Imperial Army, but now those were half-decayed, stinking corpses resurrected by some unknown power. Horus broke into the center of the destroyed ship to personally kill whoever had wrought such horror upon the Imperial forces, whoever they might be. The 16th Legion units and the Titans of Legio Mortis formed a circular defense. The Collegia Titanica, a division of the Adeptus Mechanicus, which oversees the Imperial Titans, enormous machines of colossal power capable of operating on planetary surfaces. The extraordinarily complex machinery of Titans leads the Adeptus Mechanicus to regard them as the highest incarnations of the Omnissiah, the Machine God. The Collegia Titanica was formed before the beginning of the Age of Imperium and was the primary military unit of the Adeptus Mechanicus until the unification of Mars and Terra. After the Treaty of Olympus, these powerful war machines joined the Legio Astartes and the Imperial Army in the Great Crusade to conquer the galaxy. The crew of Titans consists of a considerable number of ordinary tech priests and servitors. The higher command structure of a Titan includes the Princeps, a person who has undergone an 8-year training on Mars. The Princeps connects with the Titan via a neural interface and perceives the body of the Titan as his own, in particular, feelings of pain during damage. Moderati, bridge officers of the Titan responsible for executing the commands of the Princeps and controlling the primary systems. Like the Princeps, the Moderati have a neural interface but cannot command the Titan, only gathering information about it through this link. Sensori, officers of communication and target detection. Steersman, tech priests responsible for the Titan's movement and maintaining its balance. The Collegia Titanica distinguishes 4 main types of Titans. The Warhound, the smallest of the Titans, used as a scout or in large numbers on the flanks of the Titan Legion. The main distinguishing features of the Warhounds from the other Titans is their non-humanoid appearance. Weapons mounted on their shoulders and legs with joints bending in reverse. The Warhound is less armored than other Titans, but is still a powerful war machine, standing 14 meters tall, with a twin-barrel turbo laser destroyer capable of penetrating the armor of far more protected automata, while armament variations exist. Reavers, a multi-purpose humanoid war machine used on the front lines for warfare. The design of Reavers is quite ancient, predating the Age of the Imperium. They were used in the early battles on Mars, back in the Age of Darkness. By the time of the Heresy, they were considered an intermediate class and were produced in limited batches, gradually being overshadowed by the Warlord class Titans. Warlords, a larger and significantly heavier arm model of Titan compared to the Reavers. Warlords are the most frequently used of all Titans despite their sluggishness. The sizes of Warlords can vary greatly depending on sources, ranging from 33 to 50 meters in height. Many models of this class were already equipped with void shields, providing them with additional defense. Imperator class Titans, the largest and most powerful Titans, essentially walking fortresses, far exceeding Warlord class Titans in terms of armament. At medium and long combat distances, they can push through, often carrying entire companies of army units within their giant legs that provide support and protection from smaller targets. Due to their massive size, they carry powerful energy installations capable of shielding them with void shields similar to those on ships. Battle Orders, or Legio, are independent structures within the Collegia, each possessing its own Titans, Princeps, and Moderati, as well as ground troops and support personnel. Legios, like the orders of Imperial Knights, are stationed on various worlds, serving to protect the Imperium. Many, such as the famed Legio Mortis or Legio Audax, are attached to the expeditionary fleets and report directly to the command of Astartes legions and their Primarchs. Within the ship, Horus fought the creature calling itself Eugene Temba, sustaining only minor wounds. The War Master killed the traitor who had stained himself with treachery and the poison of the Immaterium. The moons of Davin were cleansed from the taint, and order was restored, but Horus's wounds. His wounds. Despite the superhuman physiology of the Primarchs, the wounds would not heal. Horus quickly fell into a coma. What happened was something no one from the 63rd expedition could believe. A news spread across the Legion, the fleet, and the army. Horus had fallen. The War Master was dying. None of Horus's close aides knew what to do. The physiology of the Primarchs was known only to the Emperor, but Horus would not survive the flight to Terra. The solution was suggested by the first chaplain of the Word-Bearers, Erebus. He spoke to the ancient cults that existed on the moons of Davin, particularly a snake cult known for healing any ailments. It was essential to pass the wounded War Master to them for a ritual, which was the only right decision. Many from the Legion were vehemently opposed. Cults, shaman, and rituals contradicted Imperial truths, and if anything should be done, it was to consign the foul cultists to the flames. However, secret lodges created by Erebus had long been functioning within the Legion, consisting of officers from Horus's personal council, Marnival, and most of the higher command staff of the Legion. The lodge decided to allow Erebus and the shamans of the snake cult to conduct the ritual. A member of Marnival, Captain Garviel Loken, was resolutely opposed and conducted his investigation, discovering at the battle site of Themba and Horus a casting from the blade that had inflicted the ill-fated injury. It was merely a guess on Loken's part, but apparently, the Blade of Anathema had been stolen from the Interrex by none other than the first chaplain of the Word-Bearers, Erebus. Unfortunately, it was already too late. The War Master was locked in a cave. The ritual began. In a coma, Horus saw before him his fallen legionnaire, Hastur Sejanus. Sejanus showed Horus the future. Future in which the Emperor was worshipped like a god. His father forbade all religions and cults to elevate only himself. A future where the Imperium was transformed into a terrifying theocratic state. A future where people revered, alongside the Emperor, only 9 Primarchs, a mere 9! Among the revered was the angelic Sanguinius, whom Horus sometimes envied, but among them there was no Horus. Sejanus convinced him that the Emperor was a dictator who would dispose of his sons as soon as they conquered the galaxy in his name. Indeed, the Primarchs themselves were created through a deal with hidden chaos gods. Horus, like Lorgar 40 years prior, saw how the gods created the warp barrier, scattering the Primarchs to prevent the new age of Imperium. At the same time, on the distant planet of Prospero, Magnus began his ritual. He needed to hurry to ensure that the War Master would not fall into heresy. By uniting his powers and the powers of the Psyker Thralls, the Primarch of the Thousand Suns managed to penetrate through giant distances into the vision of the War Master. Horus was greatly surprised to see his brother. Magnus urged him that the future he saw was merely a possible outcome, which would occur precisely because the War Master would betray their father. Magnus stripped the guise of Hastur Sejanus, revealing that it was Erebus who was convincing Horus to betray the Emperor. The War Master, realizing he was part of someone else's game, rejecting Magnus's plea and the false words of Erebus, the War Master demanded to know those behind all this, and the Dark Gods revealed themselves. Give us the Emperor, and we will give you the galaxy. The War Master, Horus Lupercal, made his decision, guided as he thought by noble intentions, saving the inhabitants of the Imperial from the impending authoritarian theocracy. He accepted the help of the dark, mysterious gods, but not for them, but for himself and humanity. 9 days later, the War Master emerged from the cave to his legion. The legion, which by then had already changed the white color of the Luna Wolves to the dark green battle paints of the Sons of Horus. From now on, the 16th Legion, the Sons of Horus, led by the War Master, would follow a different